Here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at...
This is HBR News number 373. Ex-Goldman Sachs employee writes on toxic and sexist work culture. Epstein updates, where we reflect on the stories of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all of this craziness so that it doesn't, in fact, make you crazy. I am one of your hosts, Brian, and I'm joined by, as always, my austere patriarchs and our handmaiden, Hannah, Mike J, and Dr. Ranrikham. We have a great show lined up for you guys today, so please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comment section. On this week's HBR News Show, we have more Hose Mad of the Week. This week, we're going to be talking about some recent developments regarding the late Jeffrey Epstein. A former Goldman Sachs employee writes an expose revealing in a book that she recently released a toxic and sexist workplace environment. The Pentagon recommends soldiers just get on welfare and more. So stick around. It's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So on this week's patron-only show, I found this article from a website called Nylon, which is entitled Hyperfemininity Isn't a Trend, It's a Movement. This is like, I guess it's an article that's basically talking about the feminism of the hyper-feminine girl. And, I mean, yeah, like they're just trying to rebrand it again. I don't know what else to say. It's just another rebranding. I believe that it's specifically being used to target young girls, and they're just making it look as appealing as possible. So
I'm guessing they're not talking about borderline personality disorder.
No. Even though there is like Paris Hilton right in the middle of the image that they're using to talk about what they believe, and I'm fairly certain.
Yeah, they're talking about narcissism, so they might be.
Yeah. So we'll like try to unpack this supposedly new, feminism movement that's supposedly like happening on TikTok and stuff. And they're writing about it. So, here we are. Real quick, I just want to point out, I watched Clueless the other day. Never seen it before. Okay. I've never seen it. It's with, in case you guys don't know, Alicia Silverstone, Paul Rudd, Stacey Dash, and I forget the girl's name that died. I think she died really young. She might have even
she died young.
Yeah. And I didn't get it. Like when it was over, I was like, what was this about? Because it was kind of all over the place. But it has the same aesthetic. That's why I bring it up. So it's basically like as if whatever, and the movement, I guess. So we'll take.
You have to be a poor little rich girl.
What was that, Mike?
You have to be a. Sorry, Mike.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Like that didn't really help at all.
Did it leave you clueless, Brian? That is all.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I don't know how self-aware that title is supposed to be, but yeah, as I was saying, you need to be a poor little rich girl to understand the tribulations of a poor little rich girl.
Yes, yeah.
There
well,
you
that I think might be one of the core elements, but it did seem to be a film that was lacking direction, and I was kind of surprised because it was like a big thing when it came out. But like, say, a movie that I would probably have compared it to, like Heathers or Mean Girls, well, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more like coherent. But I think that there's just something about maybe the memes that came out of Clueless, because a lot of the things that the characters say were not things that people said before, and then after it came out, girls started saying as if and stuff like that. So that
happens all the time.
Yeah.
If you like that, the same thing happened with Valley Girl. And like I never heard any of the things that became common phrases and after Valley Girl, before Valley Girl. Maybe they were common in the area, but they weren't common all over the place. And Bill and Ted was another one. There were a lot of things a lot of slang that came out of Bill and Ted.
Yeah, but I mean, Bill and Ted were likable characters.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Stoner movies do it. Stoner movies do it.
Yeah.
But narcissist movies for girls are stoner movies for.
They are.
That's
they
pretty
are.
bad.
Right? I think so. I think that might be the. That's
Was
why.
it ever
Mean Girls.
explicitly
Bunch of
said
stuff
that
came
they
out of Mean
smoked
Girls.
weed?
Yeah. What was that?
No, they just
Okay.
acted like stoners. I don't think they actually showed it in that film. They
What do
just
you-
acted like it.
Are you talking about Bill and Ted? Yeah. They left it open. But like you got the sense that they were probably aware of drugs. But again, like back then, we were usually a little bit more subtle. So
Yeah.
Anyhow, going back to, so that will be the patron show subject. We're going to learn about the hyper feminine movement of TikTok. And I think that it's going to be kind of eye opening because, again, I think what's happening is ideologues are using social media to groom young people. And this is one of the ways you can do it. That's just my thinking. So if you want to join us on the patron show and go through the article and discuss it, please consider becoming a badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and setting up a monthly subscription. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we have been yeeted from the internet, please go to badgerfeed.com or honeybadgerradio.com so that you can find where our content lives, because we're going to keep doing this, I guess, until we can't do it anymore. And if they eat us, then we're going to need people to come find us. So that's badgerfeed.com and honeybadgerradio.com. All right. I think that is everything. So we're going to jump into the stories. Let's do a little update on, I guess, Jeffrey Epstein, the late
He's still
Jeffrey
dead.
Epstein. Rest in peace. No, I'm kidding. Burn in hell. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, update. He still did.
Exactly.
So, an anonymous, self-described lawyer, writer, and researcher on the internet named TechnoFog believes the FBI is hiding information about the late Jeffrey Epstein. The internet detective filed a Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) request in relation to records on Epstein and claims to have received the following response. Quote, "The records responsive to your request are law enforcement records. There's a pending or prospective law enforcement proceeding relevant to these responsive records, and a release of the information could reasonably be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings." End quote. Prior records releases from the FBI paint Epstein as a bureau informant, specifically a line from a document from a 2018 release which read, quote, "Epstein has also provided information to the FBI as agreed upon," end quote. TechnoFog has his suspicions as to why his request was denied, stating, quote, "It's more likely that the Epstein records might embarrass the FBI. The DOJ and FBI have been known to abuse the FOIA law enforcement exemption to hide investigative materials from public release. We've seen them do it, and they're doing it again," end quote. TechnoFog continues this line of logic, stating, quote, "We're exceedingly doubtful that the release of the Epstein records would interfere with law enforcement proceedings. Ghislaine Maxwell has been convicted, and Epstein is dead. The only potential tie might be from a grand jury investigation into other possible co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein, but that was from the summer of 2020, and we rightly assume no charges were brought against whoever was being investigated." End quote.
Bear in mind, if this is what we know about the FBI, this and the other things we now know about the FBI and their shenanigans, imagine what we don't know. They're generally very good at hiding the worst of their crimes, so whatever we're looking at is only ever the tip of the iceberg. So at this point, if anyone out there can present the case for not defunding and abolishing the FBI, I'd like to hear it. Just for the sake of argument, I'd like someone to come forward and defend its existence in whatsoever way they find possible, preferably someone who's a neutral third party who is not themselves an obvious glowy. But yeah, even if it's someone affiliated with the FBI, please do tell us how and why this beloved organization of yours is a force for good in the world. Bear in mind that the purpose of any government or government institution of a country is supposed to be to serve the citizens of that country. Please explain to us how the FBI is doing that. And I should remind you that serving the interests of the Democrat Party is not synonymous with serving the people, especially a Democrat Party that is hell-bent on demonizing patriotic Americans and Republican voters and concerned parents. Seems an awful lot like what you have there is just a goon squad hired to rig elections and train brutal corporate-sponsored dictators around the world. Would it be acceptable for there to at least be a national conversation on to what degree the American people are at all in favor of keeping this rogue institution on the taxpayers' payroll? Is anyone allowed to talk about this without getting false flagged into obscurity or straight up disappeared and rendition? In Britain, there's a sort of parallel but not comparable phenomenon occurring at the moment. People are noticing that they're not allowed to criticize the monarchy. You can and will be arrested and charged with offensive communications if you do so, be it in person or on social media. And this has had people who were otherwise not politically motivated coming out of the woodwork and going, hold on, this is kind of fucked up. If the monarchy can't stand up to criticism without draconian state censorship, then maybe it's time to abolish the monarchy. And you can see why they'd come to such a quandary. But it's pretty rich, really, since you're not allowed to criticize BLM either, or rainbow flag-waving ignorant geeks. But there's no talk of abolishing that shit. For at least 10 years, the police have been arresting people for offending women online, but there's no talk of abolishing women. To call me crazy, but I think what we should be abolishing is the state persecuting and arresting people for their speech, no matter who or what they happen to be criticizing. Seems like that would cover all the bases. Alas, we're dealing with people who don't want all the bases covered. They want to abolish anything traditional while they pedestalize this modern Marxist buffoonery without ever having to answer for their rank hypocrisy. And it's the same in the US, except it's even more twisted. By all accounts, these radical Marxists should be calling for the abolishment of the FBI. But surprise, surprise, they're fine with it because it's been captured by other radical Marxists who hate Americans. Yeah, if only the British people knew that the royal family is just the same, now being led by King Charles III, just another shill for the World Economic Forum. And don't give me that shit that he's renouncing his membership. He waited until now to make that empty gesture, when the right time to do it was at least 2 years ago. He's still doing their bidding, and you know it. So, yeah, abolish King Charles at the very least. Abolish whoever's in charge of the FBI at the very least. And abolish the goddamn WEF at the absolute minimum. Bit of a tangent there, but, you know, royal families. Quite the hot topic over here, and the news won't shut up about it, so neither will I. Go on.
There you go. I got bad news for everybody in regard to the FBI. They're doing exactly what they were created to do. The conservatives that keep telling you that 95% of the FBI is good and they're all intended. Their job is to protect and serve. Well, they don't finish that. Their job has always been to protect and serve the federal government, not the people. The FBI is not your cops. They're your president's cops. And we found out what happens when they don't like their boss, when they don't like the leader of the country. They try to frame him. So they're rogue in that way. But in terms of what's going on right now with Epstein, I don't think that's unusual. I think that's common. They use this stuff to take down people they want to take down. and to not take down people they don't want to take down. So if there's evidence that people they are willing to protect committed crimes, that'll disappear. If there's evidence that people they want to get rid of committed crimes, that'll come out when they can use it. And I hate to sound really cynical, but honestly, that really is why the FBI was created. The whole time the FBI has existed, that has been its purpose. That has been what it's for. And I just want to draw your attention to some weasel words in the FBI statement. In terms of law enforcement records and everything, law enforcement records are not in and of themselves secret unless there is an investigation going on or they plan to have an investigation going on. So what they've said here that's weasel word is there is a pending or prospective law enforcement proceeding, meaning that they're not actually saying there's a pending law enforcement proceeding. It means they have information that they could use to charge someone, and they haven't charged them yet. And they haven't decided to charge them yet. And in terms of, the Epstein stuff, remember, they took over his home. He was arrested. They had enough evidence to convict Ghislaine Maxwell. And they had enough evidence to put her away for quite a while. They had plenty of witnesses. They would have all of their electronic communications, any photographs, any film, any records, financial records, or anything that was in that home. They would have all of that. So they're not waiting for more evidence. So if they haven't charged somebody that they could charge, the question becomes, what the fuck are they waiting for? And the only answer I can come up with is, it's not useful yet. They can't use it against somebody in power, and they can't use it to prevent somebody from getting into power, so they don't have a reason to charge somebody. Right? And then the rest of it, the release of the information could reasonably be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings, meaning they don't actually expect it. Just that it reasonably could be expected if there were enforcement proceedings, which clearly there are not. Because if there were, they would have said that there is a pending law enforcement proceeding. And they would have said the release of the information would interfere with enforcement proceedings. So the fact that they did not say that indicates that they are holding something just in case, against somebody, just in case. And I wonder who it is. I have to wonder. Now, every time you see somebody on Capitol Hill go along with the status quo, when you would expect them, based on their political ideology, or at least their stated ideology, their history, and so on, to go against it, you're going to have to wonder, is this the person that the FBI is blackmailing?
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, that's a good question. And thanks for pointing out the weasel words. You always have to be on the lookout for those.
Weasel words are everything when it comes to a statement from a government agency.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, does anyone else have any thoughts on this story?
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm super glad we have the FBI to figure out, dismantle, and arrest terrorist plots hatched by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's the one thing they are really good at.
Apparently, yeah. Well, yeah. So I guess we'll see if there are any more developments.
Heck, if they wait long enough, they can create their own evidence.
Yeah, they could just find it.
In their basement. Yeah.
Stranger things have happened. All right.
Yep.
So Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Just thought I would just do a quick little update. Not really sure like if anything is going to come out of this, but I guess it's a little bit of a slow news day, minus the Queen stuff, which I wasn't really sure I wanted to like get into because apparently there are all manner of opinions, and I frankly don't know what I could possibly have added to that. So, what were you gonna say?
I will say I fully expect feminists to come out now that there is a king instead of a queen and start saying that the monarchy is outdated and misogynistic.
Oh yeah.
Them saying that won't have any bearing on whether or not it is actually outdated and what should be done by the British people. But I expect him to say it. I expect misogyny to be the bigger complaint. They'll basically say that it's a arm of the patriarchy, but it wasn't an arm of the patriarchy for some reason last month.
No,
I've been predicting this since 10 years ago. The moment everyone has to switch to God Save the King and Long Live the King, feminists aren't going to put up with that for an afternoon. It's going to get abolished as soon as possible. Mark my words.
Yes, and because the patriarchy's back in charge, boys, and they can't have that. So, all right. But anyway, let us know what you guys' thoughts are on that story. Let us now move on to the next one. We're going to be looking at, I guess, the sexism at Goldman Sachs. So, Mike J, if you could.
Why, certainly, Brian. So, a female former managing director at Goldman Sachs alleges many instances of sexist harassment and abuse in her new memoir. Jamie Fioria Higgins shares these stories and more in her book, Bully Market, My Story of Money and Misogyny in Goldman Sachs. Higgins took over as managing director, MD, post-Great Recession in 2008 and eventually quit in 2017. In total, working at the company for 17 years. As an MD, she describes her duties as, quote, running trainee and internship programs, recruiting and managing top equity clients, and $96 billion in stock, end quote. She details the first instances of harassment after she gave birth. In order to keep working, she needed to frequently visit her work's lactation room. At one point, we don't have one at HR. We don't have one at HBR. We don't have a lactation room.
We've got like 100 rooms in this Discord, and there's no lactation room.
Yeah, but Allison.
Clearly, if we create a lactation room, it is not going to be the same as Goldman Sachs.
Oh, I think I know what it would look like already. Actually,
yes.
Yeah,
it would be stained white for different reasons.
God bless boobies. But that's like, I've never worked anywhere that had a lactation room. And I now I really want to, see more about why this woman was so oppressed, that her workplace actually had a place for her to go as a young mother to pump breast milk.
So, at one point, a senior male employee told her she wouldn't make MD if she was busy pumping milk instead of working. But it didn't end there, she stated. Other colleagues would literally moo at her. And one day she even claims to have found a toy cow on her desk. After she suffered a miscarriage, she explains how her seniors were insensitive to her. She claims she was pressured into returning to work due to a staffing shortage, even though her doctor had advised her to take time off. Another time, she claims that a male employee physically accosted her, pinning her to a wall and threatening her with physical harm after she had removed him from an account she discovered that he was having an affair with the client of. When she reported this incident to her boss, he told her to take it to Human Resources. Higgins isn't without blame by her own admission. She states, quote, "People appreciate the fact that I'm very explicit. I'm the victim of a toxic environment, but I perpetuated it. Some horrible stuff happened to me, but I did stuff I'm not proud of, and that honest view resonates. And it resonates beyond Goldman Sachs," end quote. Due to the non-disclosure agreement she signed, all of the names in Higgins' book have been anonymized. Goldman Sachs has responded to this with a statement dismissing these anonymous allegations. Goldman Sachs also stated, quote, "Had Miss Higgins raised these allegations with our Human Resources Department at the time, we would have investigated them thoroughly and addressed them seriously."
Yeah, that's what HR departments do. They harass male employees at the whim of any Karen with a grievance or with just an axe to grind. Real axe or imagined axe. They also harass white employees and straight employees and so on down the stack. Their job is to prevent the company from getting sued by anyone who has a feasible chance of suing them, namely women, because judges are also there to harass and persecute men at any opportunity. So even at face value, the real story here is woman unaware of the misandry inherent in the system. And that is not exactly a story. Women generally aren't aware of the misandry inherent in the system, or at least they refuse to acknowledge it even while they're utilizing it. They're very much kept suspended in this fantasy world where everyone hates and neglects women and only women and will stop at nothing to keep them down. And all of this is only if we take it at face value. These could all be misapprehensions on her part, or embellishments, or just straight up lies. Maybe she was always fully aware that HR departments are weapons that can be pointed at men at the whim of any Karen, so she just pulled the trigger. Because Lord knows that's easier than doing work. I would imagine you'd need to have a bit of a cutthroat sort of personality to work for the likes of Goldman Sachs. You'd need a certain abscess in your conscience to be able to live with yourself, regardless of your gender. She's a woman second, a feckless grunt for an investment bank first. Never let any identity politics distract you from what a bunch of cunts they all are. Fuck it, actually, good luck to her. I hope she takes them to the cleaners. Either we lose a soulless corporate behemoth that was supposed to be too big to fail, or somewhere along the line they change the system so women don't have the power to take everyone to the cleaners. Hopefully it trickles down to small businesses who are doing honest work and who can't afford to get sued by a runaway Karen even once. We can dream.
It sounds like she chose not to take them to the cleaners. The fact that there's a non-disclosure agreement indicates that she has left the company, which I think her writing also indicates, and she has made some sort of a deal with them already. So she probably got paid. But the thing about taking a bank that big to the cleaners is you can't win enough money to take a bank like Goldman Sachs to the cleaners. Like you can take them to the corner convenience store, but not to the cleaners. They've got more money than God, and that's no joke. And in terms of them having that much money to their name, that's not the only money they have. They have your money. They have every tax dollar that runs through the system as well. And the reason I say this is there are a set of scams that banks and the government run on a regular basis. One of them is the housing bubble scam. Sorry, I sound so awful. I was in a dusty environment on Sunday, and it is just killing me. But what they do is Democrat administration will start with this narrative that banks are engaging in prejudicial lending practices that cut minorities out of the mortgage system, so you can't buy a home if you're a minority. The reason that claim works, is because in the early 20th century, it was true. If you were black, you could get a BMW on a loan, but you couldn't get a house. So you would see people living in a shack with a dirt floor and a really nice car, because that's what they could buy. But that's not happening anymore. And there's not, the way the practices are set up, it's not possible for the allegation to be true. But it's treated as if it is. So then Democrat legislators will pass laws that, you have to change the way that you're lending. You have to update your policy to be more lenient toward minorities in your lending practices, or we're going to start investigating you. And banks will change their policies, and they'll relax their lending standards specifically for certain types of minorities. And that's been ever expanding, by the way, every time it happens, depending on what's politically correct at the time. And then a few years later, they've lent to a bunch of people who actually couldn't keep up with the payments, or inflation happens, or life changes happen, and then there's a bunch of news stories about how banks are targeting poor minorities for foreclosure. So then they get hit with another bit of legislation or policy change that says that they have to be more lenient in their foreclosure practices with those same minorities. And then you end up with a Republican administration, and the banks start whining that they are dealing with issues financially because of this problem, that they've taken a whole lot of losses. The housing bubble burst, and now they're in real trouble, and all of a sudden they need a bailout, or they're going to go under. When actually, if they were able to just restructure financially, they wouldn't have that problem most of the time. And so they get their bailout, and they get millions to billions of tax dollars from your country. And that's whatever country you live in where you're listening. There's probably been at least some bank bailout similar to what the American Republicans do. And then the next Democrat comes in, and the cycle starts all over again. Meanwhile, the banks that do this are the biggest donors to both parties. So that's one of their scams. There are others, but that one's the most blatant and obvious. Right now, we are in the banks are discriminating allegations part of the cycle. It's made news a couple of times. I tweeted about it recently because I talked about this in 2017, and then on Twitter, and then have been kind of watching the news, and it's been sort of building up over the last couple of years. And now that you've got Biden in, that's what they're doing, right? So that's how banks basically work. And this woman is probably fully aware of that. And she knew that she could ask for and she would receive as long as she played the game. And I'm sure she probably got paid. She probably got a shitload of money. And she chose not to go to human resources because she could do that instead. And it's all basically a shark feeding among other sharks and telling the other sharks, I'll play your game as long as you give me some of your fish. And that's it. That's what's going on here. This woman is not oppressed. She probably was never harassed. If she was, she had avenues that she could have taken to do something about it, and she chose not to because she could get more money. So she wasn't oppressed by the harassment. And frankly, I've worked with women that had to go on break periodically to pump, and they were the ones making the cow jokes. You feel like a cow when you have to go do that. I wasn't working when I had to do that. I just was making a lot of extra. But it feels like being a cow hooked up to a machine. It's just a weird experience, and it is funny. Like, there's no getting around it. the experience of pumping breast milk is hilarious. I know there's going to be women in the listening audience or women that are going to hear about this. They're going to be like, "You're just making it worse." But it is. It's funny as fuck. And if you can't laugh at it, there's something wrong with you. So I don't doubt that this woman maybe was a little bit offended by some of her experiences, but I think she was deliberately oversensitive, and I think she was deliberately under defensive about the things that she was oversensitive about because she got money. She was able to get money for it. So that's basically what's going on here. And in terms of the banks, like I said, she can't take them to the cleaners, but the ruthlessness involved here is pretty par for the course with banks. And don't let any woman tell you that in an environment like that they're not just as ruthless as the men.
Oh yeah.
The one thing I will say to sort of bolster your claim that she probably never went to HR was the one where, like I said, she says a guy, when she fired him or removed him from the contract, didn't fire him, removed him from the contract over having an affair with the client. And her exact words were, he pinned me against the wall and said something like, "If I could, I'd rip your fucking face off." And she went to her boss and he said, "Go to HR." And
yeah,
I think about that. It's like, well, what the hell was her boss supposed to do? Go over
that's
and beat
exactly
the crap
what
out of the
they're
guy?
for.
Get a lynch mob together? You go to HR.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, we know that, right? There's protocols, and she had to have known it, but that does make me doubt all of this. I was just my thinking on this too is that isn't it interesting that women, and it's because it seems like they're the ones that usually do it, because I don't think men could, even if they wanted to. Women can work at a place and have like a full career and never go to human resources or the people above them. So there appears to be no pattern of anything happening at the workplace that's untoward. And then they quit or even retire. And then they go and write a book. And it's like this big, expose or this tell-all about all of the really bad things that were happening. And it's almost always stories of harassment, sexual assault, whatever you want to call it. It's always this. It's almost like they know they could do this, and because there's no way you can prove it in any direction, and as long as you're careful about like names and any sort of specific details, they can just do this. They can just write about sexism, and of course other women will eat it up. Even if it's like completely fictional, they'll think, like this could be real. It's almost like, sometimes I think that women really enjoy stories that involve scandals. Okay, so I think they like stories like that. And a person who worked at a company like Goldman Sachs, while it's not necessary for her to make it seem like a true story, and maybe she just wanted to write and came up with some fictional thing. But if it seems like it is real, or if she's claiming that it's real, then it's more appealing. So I just see it like, it's almost like a woman's career doesn't have to end when she leaves a company. She can write a book and then claim that she experienced misogyny and sexism, and maybe she barely got out of there alive because some guy pinned her to a wall and threatened her. And everybody just eats it up, and it sells copies, and she probably made good money off this book. And of course, Goldman Sachs can't come after her because she hasn't like necessarily made any direct accusations. She didn't even go to HR, so she has plausible deniability. She can just say,
Yeah, the big thing was that they wouldn't like it. Part of the NDA was you can't use names of people, past or present, who have worked here.
Yeah.
And I guess she was very careful about that.
Exactly. Because then there'd be liabilities, right? So instead, she made all the names anonymous, or maybe she changed them, or whatever it is. But it's funny that, this is the thing I was thinking about. Like, men can't do that. A man couldn't do that. And I don't think that they should, to be fair, right? I don't think it's a good idea to essentially do the equivalent of spreading rumors without being called to task to prove anything, and then instead it's identical to the stuff that's going on, in my opinion, with Hugh Hefner. It's the same as the stuff that was going on with Michael Jackson. It's the same as the stuff that was going on with basically you name it, right? And there is this idea that if you use your words carefully, you can just write a book about anything, make allegations, and if you're a woman, people will buy your book. And it's going to be mostly women, by the way, who are going to buy it because they're into that stuff. They're into the true crime thing, right? And so it doesn't even matter to them if it's true or not. I mean, they'll probably find ways to justify supporting it, so that they don't have to really look into whether or not it's true, because lies like this can be harmful. But since there's no names being named, I guess this makes it okay, but I just think it's really
no, it doesn't, because and it's not harmless either. This is the thing, right? Feminists will cry from the rooftops that there are not enough female CEOs, that women can't get promoted in a workplace like Goldman Sachs, that it's hard for a woman to get a job. It's not, right? It's not hard. A woman has to do the same things a man has to do. And she will get a job because they have sort of an affirmative action program for pretty much everything in a workplace like that. But they'll whine, that the women don't get those jobs. But if I was an employer and I was considering two people that were equally qualified in terms of their job history and their academic history, the skills that they are able to claim to know, the competencies that they demonstrate when I check them out, their interviews are both good. They both live nearby, all the details are the same, whatever. And one of them's male and the other one's female. And I know that a woman could leave my company and write a book like this without offering any evidence that any of the things that she's saying happened actually happened. And people will believe it. And it will affect the way people look at my company and think of my company. I'm going to hire the guy, right? I'm going to promote the guy. And I'm not going to touch her with a 10-foot pole, right?
Yep.
And that is what businesses should do in response to this stuff. But it's not what would happen. No. They're going to hire and promote women because the government pays them, because they think it makes them look good, because their higher ups subscribe to this ideology and they believe in it and so on. Mm-hmm. But not because
and the HR department,
a woman's not going to do this, right?
Yeah. The recruiters
and the HR departments are feminist.
Yeah, they're all feminist. So.
Well, and then the other thing is, if I was a 17-year-old girl looking to go out into the world, and I was deciding what I was going to go to college for, and I thought about going into accounting, and maybe someday I might work at the illustrious organization of Goldman Sachs, and I'm looking at what women have said about working there, and I run across this book, and I read this woman's so-called horror story, and let's say I've been through feminist class after feminist class, where I'm told that the things that she has described are just insurmountable hurdles, and my life is going to be hell if they happen, and nobody's going to help me, and there's nothing I can do about it, I might decide to do something else instead. Right? I might not go into a professional area where I could conceivably become the CEO of a company, or even just higher up management at a place like Goldman Sachs, because why would I want to put myself through the hell this woman claims to have experienced? And clearly, my teachers, my professors, my co-ed students, my colleagues in education, right, have all told me that this kind of thing is just keeping women down, and we can't handle it, and we're not tough enough, and we're not strong enough, and we're not smart enough, and so on. So why on earth would I go into something like that as a 17-year-old after reading a book like this? So feminists are complaining about this shit, but they're perpetuating it.
Well, yeah, of course. And also, I think it sort of reveals that a lot of women, they don't really believe that this stuff happens, but it's like they like to fantasize about it. So, because I swear, sometimes I think that feminists fantasize about being sexually threatened by men. And
50 Shades of Gold?
Yeah, I'm serious. 50 Shades of Sax. Because again,
50
like
sacks of gold.
Oh, but she got more than that.
But I think that it's about I don't know, it's about the way the narrative comes out. I think honestly, like the way that men and women think about like the world and interactions with other people are just very different. And feminist women in particular, because they're more like children than normal women. And unfortunately, normal women appear to be like a growing rarity. But they would normally be able to handle, like an environment that happens to have men in it without thinking about what men want to do to them secretly. Because I think that's how these people see it. And it's lurid, it's weird. It's almost always sexual. And I think that they just can't like seem to make peace with it. And it's just the way they see the world. And, but then they on some level have to know that none of that is actually true, even if they might kind of want it, because men just don't do that. And so, and I think this is why they like walk that line between, making allegations and plausible deniability, so that they don't actually have to like make good on anything that they claim, while also claiming to be a victim. And I don't know if that's appealing to other women, but it doesn't seem to discourage them. So, it's like, well, then like, how dangerous do you think the workplace is for women? And they would say, yeah, I think it is, but then they'll still go to work because they have determined that the benefits outweigh the potential, I don't know, their fears. But maybe they don't really have fears. I'm not really sure. I don't get it. So anyway, let us know what you guys think about this story in the comment section. I'd like to see your comments on it, and let me read some super chats and we'll move on to the next one. Meredith G gives us $5 and says, honey of the Badgers. I think that meant to say honey for the Badgers. Thanks for the conversation. Thank you, Meredith. We can always count on you. Egregious Charles gives us a super chow and says, but how could Bill and Ted have been aware of drugs? There hasn't been an awareness campaign with colored ribbons and stuff. Was there like a say no to drugs thing going on when Bill and Ted came out? It was just like
say no was Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, that
so
was
like that's clear
back.
And it was probably the most effective because it was the simplest, and it still didn't work.
Well, I don't know, didn't it?
I mean,
obviously drugs didn't go away, but like I think that
actually.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say actually, what I've seen work, and I saw it work with my brother and me, and I've seen it work in other places, is making fun of the way people look when they use drugs, and it's of course my grandmother had her own approach, like she was a nurse. So when everybody else was talking to us about, like, we had a gazillion messages about not smoking and not using drugs.
Yeah.
She just very quietly, went through, like, this is what cocaine does to your heart. This is what, this alcohol does to your liver. This is what it's like to take care of someone with liver disease. And I got older and I went to work in a nursing home, and I found out she was 100% honest. She like didn't pull any punches, but she didn't make anything up either.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that, like, big reason I didn't smoke was because my dad very matter of factly and somewhat graphically told my brother and me what it was like to have to make the decision to take his mother off of life support after she lost her battle with 3 different types of cancer. And all of our physicians in our family told us we have the genetic weakness they're always talking about with regard to cigarettes and cancer. So we just don't. And like, those are things that work. You put down, hey, this is what you're spending.
Yeah.
To pay for that good time. Is it worth it?
Well,
and that's it. But like, the rest of that bullshit doesn't really work.
In general, I think nothing beats good parents. But like, I don't know. Like, I
just don't think a federal campaign works.
No, but I mean, like, I guess what I was thinking is that, like, as long as the argument is being made that, there are potential health problems for drugs. It could be alcohol, cigarettes, or straight up, like, cocaine or whatever.
Right.
And that you basically, like, tell people, this is why you should say no. But I would prefer a campaign like that over, let's say, just making it all, like, illegal, because that is, and so, like, I'm choosing between those two things. But in general, I think the funny thing about the drugs, the drug PSAs is from the 80s, and there's like 2 that come to mind. One is like a drug dealer, and he like approaches the camera and he's like telling them, and it's non-specific. He doesn't say what kind of drugs it is, but that he's selling drugs. And over the course of the ad or the PSA, he's like turning into a reptilian, and like at the end he's like a full-on snake man. And I that stood out because as a kid I was like, holy shit, drug dealers are scary, right? And then there was the someone in the chat mentioned it. I believe, I can't remember her name, but there was an actress and she has a frying pan.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
That is what heroin does.
Rachel,
that one ended up being more humorous to me than.
Yeah, it was like Rachel Leigh Cook, I think, is her name, and she was the chick from like She's All That or something. Anyway, but yeah,
hell, if you really wanted to scare kids with regard to heroin, shoot, I can't remember the scene. The movie. It starts out with a scene where a woman with 2 little boys, she sort of pushes them off to the side, like, mommy needs some time right now, and then injects herself with heroin and proceeds to go in to seize and die from a heroin overdose in front of them. Show kids that. They'll never use heroin after that.
Well, again, like, if we're gonna do it, I think that let's try to be, stay in the realm of realism, because
age appropriateness. Well, actually,
and
that's
also
like,
age appropriate.
I've seen not the moment of death, but the aftermath, and it's pretty obvious that when people overdose on heroin, it's ugly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure. But anyway, we're getting off topic there. But thank you, Charles, for that comment. And yeah, I guess what I'm saying, because the thing is, if you make it too ludicrous, I think kids know. And so it's probably like, you don't want to go too far, because then they're going to feel like first of all, that you don't respect their intelligence. And second of all, like that, they're going to feel a little manipulated. So if you're going to make recommendations to children, especially if they're your children, keep it grounded and make sure that they understand that you're telling them this for their own sake, so that they are well informed before they start exploring things. Because if you make it like, what was the thing from, speaking of, I think it was Mean Girls, there was a gym teacher talking about sex education, I think. and he said, if you have sex, you're gonna die. And he was trying to basically just tell kids not to have sex because, you know, he wanted to like tell them what the risks are. But instead, he just said, you're gonna die, right? And of course, it's intended as a joke in the film, but it scares the children, scares the teenagers, and that's what makes it funny. But the truth is, if you try that, it's just not going to work, right? Like, especially teenage kids with like raging hormones, you know, they're just not going to listen to that.
The realism thing would work better with sex education than everything that they've done in the last 50 years with sex education. You teach them the biological aspects of it, but I think if they would teach students what happens with their brain chemistry and how it influences their relationships, there would be both boys and girls who would be more cautious about who they hooked up with.
Mm. Yeah.
I'll tell you what was the thing that always stopped me from ever doing any drugs. They cost money.
Yeah. It's true.
I didn't have a lot of money as a kid. All my money was spent towards Pokemon cards and then video games.
Yeah.
You put a second expense in there, and no, there's just no way.
There's no room.
And that's just
Can't
like, you just tell your child, like, look, I don't care how much money you think you have. Drugs are going to cost more. and when you start doing them, that's all you're going to want to spend your money on. Then you're going to run out of money. And then what are you going to do to get more money?
Yeah, right.
My experiences with fever delirium. My experiences with fever delirium kept me off hallucinogens.
You can grow mushrooms in your house, you know. All you need is a plastic
You can.
Sorry, no, you can't. You shouldn't do that, folks. Don't do that.
I'm allergic to the spores. So
I know someone who tried to do that recently. It's a little more complicated than you think, and like, you really got to baby them or they die, and a whole bunch of other things.
So it's like having kids.
I wouldn't know, and I won't argue with you.
All right, well,
you just got to say, I've heard from someone else.
Yeah, through the grapevine. All right, so anyway, let us know what you guys think about
I do know that mushrooms do not grow on grapevines.
Yeah.
Because we grew grapes. Spiders grow on grapevines.
Ew. All right, well, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Let me just make sure there's no additional super chats, so we're going to move on to the next story. Okay. As inflation still grips the United States, soldiers are struggling to pay for basic necessities such as food for themselves and their families. The Pentagon suggested that those struggling soldiers apply for food stamps. The recommendation came last month from Sergeant Major of the Army Michael Grinston and directs Army soldiers and their families to apply for food stamps through the Federal Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known by the acronym SNAP. This is literally the same program, in case you guys don't know, that single mothers use to essentially like buy food for their children. The guidance from Grinston said that, quote, with inflation affecting everything from gas prices to groceries to rent, some soldiers and their families are finding it harder to get by on the budgets that they have set and used before. SNAP is a U.S. government program that provides benefits to eligible low-income individuals and families via electronic benefits transfer card that can be used like a debit card to purchase eligible food in authorized retail food stores. Service members and their families may be eligible. Quote, despite what the Biden administration claims about the U.S. economy being in good standing, the past 2 quarters of U.S. GDP growth has been negative, the traditional definition of a recession.
Welcome to your future, gentlemen. You're going to get drafted into a war that has nothing to do with you. You probably won't survive, and even if you do, you'll probably be injured for life. Even if you're not, you'll be mentally scarred for life. And even if you do make it back home unscathed, you'll be queuing for bread for the rest of your life. Begrudgingly handed out by a government that hates you, while rich, pampered onlookers spit at you for being a tool of white male violence or something. All this for the sake of invading the world to spread the good word of quote unquote our democracy. This is what you're fighting for, whether you like it or not. As usual, I have no real solutions. It's not like you can even leave the country and go to some place where men are allowed to be free. There is no such place. They probably won't let you into most countries in the quote-unquote free world unless you have proof of at least 2 lethal injections, which very much defies the idea of being free. That's why I'm still not allowed in the US, by the way. If you want to move to another country, your best option is to wear brown face and hop your ass on an illegal dinghy. Then you won't need any lethal injections and you won't even be eligible for the draft. In the meantime, I don't know, find a way not to get drafted, fake an injury or something, develop a heart defect of some sort. Maybe a heart defect is in your future anyway, if you know what I mean. Or hey, get pregnant. You can shirk your military duties to your heart's content if you're pregnant. And as we know, men can get pregnant. There you go. I'm sorry, I'm unable to go and get shot by soldiers in Russia or Taiwan, because any day now I'm expecting to give birth to twins, one wolfkin and one non-binary foxkin. It's how I identify. Don't you judge me. I'm joking, but my jokes tend to become reality in 6 months or less. So hold that thought. It could save your life one day. Good luck, gentlemen.
So there's a couple things I want to point out here, because this reveals more about the economy than most people will be aware. Starting with soldiers who live on or near military bases, which is pretty much all soldiers have to live on or near military bases. They have their own grocery store on the base. I forget what it's called. I think
ACBO.
Yeah,
Or
and
I think that's it.
It's like a it's kind of like a
government-owned grocery
government-owned, yeah. It's as much. It's a grocery store the way like Walmart is a grocery store, because they can get more than groceries there.
Buy a little bit of everything there.
Right. But I won't call it a department store necessarily, because it's not big, necessarily big, huge. But it's commissary. It's commissary.
Big convenience store.
That's what I've heard is the term commissary. But you get stuff cheaper there than you get it outside of the base. And then on top of that, I've never known a single soldier that I knew personally who was female. But all of the military wives that I've known had jobs. So it's a 2-income household. There are housing allowances and so on that they get. So their housing is cheaper in terms of, like, they're already getting assistance. And if they're having difficulty making ends meet on all of that, these are people that are more disciplined about doing that, about making ends meet. And historically, they've been discouraged from seeking assistance beyond their pay because of all of these other programs, that it's an embarrassment to the government if they seek assistance from the Health and Human Services Department and the services they provide for people who are low income. Now, if you got soldiers that have a lot of kids, they might do that anyway. But they do get pressured to not do that. And this indicates that there's a serious problem in the economy, that it's so bad in terms of their pay that the government is actually saying, yeah, go ahead and make use of the Health and Human Services financial services. And the other thing about this is, why not just increase their pay? Because they're relying on a different branch of the government for money, right? So clearly, they're not saving tax dollars through this. They're not. This is just a different department of the government that the tax dollars are going to support. So they're still being paid through tax dollars if they gain food stamps and they gain medical assistance and stuff. They're just getting it from a different department. Obviously, part of this story, an important part of this story, is that the military did get a big increase, and didn't use it to pay the soldiers. So that's a problem. And again, we are being lied to, like profoundly lied to, about the economy. But it's just incredibly stupid to have part of the soldiers' pay coming from the Health and Human Services Department instead of funding the military enough to pay the soldiers out of the military budget. Like, makes no sense whatsoever, in my opinion.
Historically, don't like bad things happen to nations when you can't pay your soldiers?
Yes.
You know, I
Yeah,
think there's
because the
precedent
soldiers
there.
quit. The soldiers quit,
Or
and
they
the
do
nations
worse.
get, yeah, or they do worse. Well, we've had a lot of soldiers quit or be pushed out of the military over the lethal injection.
And now the ones that stayed, hey, great that you stayed.
We're not going to pay you enough to live on.
Sorry about that. Go get welfare.
Yeah, like that's welfare was originally sold to the public. The idea of welfare was sold to the public on the as an idea that if people were temporarily down on their luck, they could rely on this for a little while until they were able to pull themselves out of that hole, or their families were able to help them out of that hole. And it was not supposed to be a lifestyle. And now, the majority of times, it's a lifestyle. Even if people use it periodically, they're still using it over and over again throughout their lives. And this just adds to that.
Yeah, I mean, if there was one group of people, in particular men, that we would prioritize in terms of like who we're going to take care of, you would think it would be the military. I mean,
yeah,
it just shows how bad things are, as you were saying. So
I have a correction. I've had one female friend in the military. She wasn't married.
Yeah, so this is definitely a sign of like how much worse things are getting, and the fact that they're just like, yeah, just go get SNAP. I mean, that's just like, it's actually insulting considering what we ask these guys to do. And I don't know. Something's got to change. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not here to make any like, endorsements or whatever politically, but we got to take care of these men.
I'm just saying, if you're telling your soldiers, telling your soldiers to go on welfare because you can't pay them enough, your military budget is too small and your welfare budget is too big. Because obviously there's room for them on the welfare budget, and there's not room for them on the military budget.
Or they're just passing the buck, and there's not really room for them on the welfare budget either. And
yeah, but after the government gets a hold of the buck, it's only worth 89 cents.
Yeah. Yeah, but I wonder about that as well. Like, it's not just like a bunch of men. Again, it's unbelievable, guys. A bunch of military men are going to go on SNAP, and they're probably going to get a pretty low amount of SNAP funds as well, by the way, because I've been on SNAP before when I was very poor, and even when you're like you can't find a job, and you're really struggling, like you might not get much. And I think that being a man is part of the reason too, by the way, because a single mother, she gets money depending on how many children she has, and as well as her income, right? So the more kids you have as a single mom, the more money you're going to get. Not just because SNAP doesn't just give you food stamps, which is essentially what they're saying here, but it can, depending on what your needs are, they might also give you money so that you can use it to pay bills or, you know, fill your gas tank or whatever it is. But when you're a man, you're less likely to get it, and you're certainly not going to get like as much, because men can't claim children as part of their welfare. And like it's just assumed, I suppose, that a man is going to like be able to better, you know, ration out his benefits, or whatever. Because I used to get like, I don't know, like $100 a month for food, and
Yeah.
that just doesn't cut it.
I
mean,
think
it
the
helps,
conclusion
I'll
they
take
reach
it,
is
but-
like, I think the conclusion they reach is like, well, you're not raising any children.
right.
You don't have a significant other. It's just you. Just get a job, bro. Just find a
Yeah.
job, bro.
Yeah, the funny thing is, with respect to men, they do what they should be doing for everybody, and that is, if you get welfare assistance, they put you to work, and they call it volunteering, but it's not, because you lose your assistance if you don't. So it's essentially like a job, except instead of paying you minimum wage, you're working a certain number of hours, and getting like $2 and some odd cents out of it, is per hour. And you know, they tell you it's temporary. They're very strict as to how much they hand out. If you are a woman and you have children, the caseworker is suddenly much more motivated to find a way to give you money. And there are ways that she can find that she won't look for if you're a single man.
Yeah.
If you happen to have minority status that you can tell them about, and you're female and you have kids, then they're even more motivated to find pathways to give you money. And then if you come in a few months later and say, thanks for all your help, I got everything straightened out, I'm working full-time now, I don't need this anymore, then they will tell you how you can divorce your husband and continue to receive benefits. Because that's what this system is geared for. And now we're subjecting our soldiers to it, and the divorce rate in the military is fucking high enough.
Yeah, that's another issue. So, does anyone else have any thoughts on this before we move on to the final story? All right, so this final story is kind of a doozy. I mean, it was like a lot wilder than I thought it was going to be. So, unfortunately, there's no pictures to go with it, because it's just like text from a page from Science Daily. And here's what it says. Jigsaw, a unit within Google that, quote, explores threats to open societies, end quote, open societies, helped run a social media experiment to potentially inoculate users against misinformation. Just a quick note. Jigsaw defines red pilling as, quote, the process of buying into an extremist ideology, and entails learning the coded language, conspiracy theories, and ideals of the movement, end quote. A team of psychologists, so this is like the people who came up with this, I guess, from the universities of Cambridge and Bristol, along with Jigsaw, created 90-second clips ran in YouTube's advert slot, designed to illustrate manipulation techniques like scapegoating. Calling it pre-bunking, get it? It's like debunking, but it's before like an argument is even made. Pre-bunking.
Yeah, they do this all the time. I love it.
Yeah. They're always making up words. That's why. The strategy was to preemptively expose people to tropes at the root of propaganda, of which they are not at all delivering to us. They conducted 7 experiments involving almost 30,000 participants, as well as a real-world field study on inoculation theory. That is, that by giving people a microdose of misinformation in advance, it will help them from falling for it in the future. These in the wild videos played in the pre-video advert slot where Google Jigsaw expose around 5.4 million US YouTubers to an inoculation video. Period. The platform then gave a random 30% of users that watched a voluntary test question within 24 hours of their initial viewing. According to Science Daily, users' ability to recognize manipulation techniques at the heart of misinformation increased by 5% on average. Lead author Dr. John Rosenbeek said, quote, "Our interventions make no claims about what is true or a fact, which is often disputed. They are effective for anyone who does not appreciate being manipulated. The inoculation effect was consistent across liberals and conservatives. It worked for people with different levels of education and different personality types. This is the basis of a general inoculation against misinformation." Google will be running a pre-bunking campaign over several platforms in Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic to get ahead of emerging disinformation relating to Ukrainian refugees. According to Science Daily, quote, "The campaign is designed to build resilience to harmful anti-refugee narratives in partnership with local NGOs," because, you guys can trust them, "fact checkers, academics, and disinformation experts," end quote. And then there's another quote from Beth Goldberg, who says, quote, "Harmful misinformation takes many forms, but the manipulative tactics and narratives are often repeated and can therefore be predicted," said Beth Goldberg, co-author and head of research and development for Google's Jigsaw unit. And they continue teaching people about techniques like ad hominem attacks that set out to manipulate them can help build resilience to believing and spreading misinformation in the future. We've shown that that video ads as a delivery method of pre-bunking messages can be used to reach millions of people, potentially before harmful narratives take hold. And I meant to show you guys, before Mike jumps in there and rants, I'm going to show you.
Why would I? I'm about to do that.
There is a website for this jigsaw.google.com, and I just remembered this because it is one of those like really annoying interactive websites where the more you scroll down, there's like animations and you feel like a child being like lectured on something. So I'm going to let me share the browser with you guys so you can look at it. It's just sort of showing like, the way that they generally work, and so you guys can see it. So global, connected, and decentralized. To understand violent white supremacy, because now we're talking about white supremacy, we need to learn from former white supremacists. Abandon myths about lone actor violence, because it's never a lone actor, I guess, and investigate the informal networks through which this movement spreads. Violent white supremacism is flourishing through robust communication networks with weak social ties. And you can keep scrolling. They have like sections that you can dive deeper into. For example, the mythology of the lone wolf. So like anytime there's a shooting or something, the lone wolf thing is, and these are the guys, by the way, these are the guys that are trying to protect us from misinformation. These are the pre-bunkers. The rise of informal groups. Many white supremacists are unaffiliated with a formal group by design. Globally network movement, the alt-tech ecosystem. So basically, if you're on Getter or Parler or BitChute or Rumble, yeah, you're part of the white supremacist alt-tech ecosystem. In March of 2019, Brendan Tarrant stormed a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, and murdered 51 people. And so we're going to hear all about these like mass shooters, and it's basically, and you notice as I scroll, it shows, it's basically like an ad, and they go deeper into more and more of this, and it
is an ad, by the way.
It is an ad, yeah.
Literally showed in YouTube pre-rolls, they said, right?
Yeah, they're going to be, I guess they're going to be like, so if you, let's say you go to YouTube, okay, and you go to watch a video, and let's say you're watching a video by, like, I don't know, like a Ben Shapiro video, which is probably about as milquetoast as it gets on the right, and you're waiting for your Ben Shapiro video, and you're going to get essentially a pre-roll clip from these people, right? Want me to scroll down some more? Lindsay's in here. She wants. Oh yeah, red pilling is the process of buying into an extremist ideology and entails learning the coded language, conspiracy theories, and ideals of the movement. And I love how they got a hand holding a red pill, and it's also making the OK sign. Which, if you guys don't know, yes, it's doing both. Because
is that a dog whistle I hear?
I'm picturing the proposal for this as like a boardroom with the administrators that were in charge of the departments that are doing this, going, all right, guys, we have a massive propaganda campaign that we need to run. That it's going to be blatant and obvious propaganda, undeniable. It's totally recognizable. That we're trying to get people to do certain things, make certain political decisions, adopt certain political outlooks, and hate certain political outlooks, avoid certain political outlooks. This is not easy to hide. How are we going to disguise this? Oh, here's what we're going to do. And then they came up with this idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like we already know that big tech is working really hard to control the narrative around, I mean, at this point, it could be around anything. It could be around, like, the new Disney movie. It could be around, like, the remnants of the COVID conversation. And they basically need to maintain that narrative as well. Lindsay says, if I keep scrolling, so there's a girl that falls down a rabbit hole. And this is what I mean by, like, it's presented in such a childish way. Like, and that's what, like, is actually quite this is what they think of you. Like, this is what they think of you. You're so stupid that they can just put a bunch of images, of red pills and scary graphs, that, try to compare. They literally compare, like, the danger of white supremacy in the United States to Islamic terrorism. And, so yeah, it's just like a constant bombardment, and they use this, like I said, it's very, like, slick looking imagery and animations, but it's all just to manipulate. So here's like a girl. Oh yeah, they told the whole story of some girl named Taylor, which of course we can't confirm, like, actually exists, and she fell down the red pill rabbit hole. And I think it's extra interesting that they made Taylor a woman. I think it's because we're supposed to find her, like, really, like, a tragic casualty of, like, the online, manosphere or whatever it is. And of course,
well, contrary to the claims that social justice types make about their scientific findings with regard to what people find to be the default person, anytime they want to make someone relatable, they make that person female.
Yeah. Okay, so here, I'll read a bit of it, okay? Taylor had never felt racist or misogynist, but her new online friends piqued her curiosity by contradicting mainstream liberal views on race science and feminism. As their discussions devolved into unironic support for extremism and violence, they moved to communities on Discord, Wire, and Telegram. And of course, this girl couldn't do anything about it. She just started believing them because of their thrall, I guess. In these private channels, Taylor befriended more radical extremists. They groomed her as a prospect, prompting her for her thoughts on fascist ideologies and.
Are they allowed to say that?
Apparently,
that's the context in which you are allowed to say groomer.
Yeah, apparently. Ranging from well-known white supremacist texts to niche accelerationist manifestos. Taylor didn't know what she was a prospect for, but she was eager to accept the alluring private chat invitations in order to access the hidden knowledge these groups claim to possess. She gained status by reading and making like-minded comments. Before long, Taylor was the only one reaching out to new prospects, running honeypot servers to vet potential recruits and creating propaganda materials for fascist groups. So not only that, but like she was able to like draw other men in with her honeypot servers.
Gee, I wonder who they're referring to with regard to the honeypot servers. Or servers. I mean, like how many groups have highly active female-run servers?
Well, honeypots.
You all know my name. Say it.
Honeypot it's a very old term.
Oh, we know. It's something that women have done for ages, but it doesn't have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, well, who are they referring to? Like in the real world?
I wish we were that big.
I don't know another group that's anything like us.
Yeah,
but it's crazy. It's crazy how Taylor was her name.
Who?
That Taylor was the name of the person in this.
Yeah, the character. The character.
It's
in this narrative.
It's wow. It's crazy how someone can start working for the FBI that early.
Yep.
That's everything she's described so far.
It might be referring to Cassie J because she did a movie called The Red Pill, and I think it reached more people than.
Yeah, they're definitely, I think, referring to Cassie J with the whole falling down the rabbit hole thing and joining the server. But I was thinking more in terms of who's running the server to begin with.
Mm-hmm. I'm still waiting to hear this part where Taylor like bombs a federal building or like attacks a Black Lives Matter rally.
Well, where was Taylor on January 6th, Mike? We don't.
Oh my! Like, fuck! Yeah. We got it. Shut it down. Shut it down.
Across ideologies, former white supremacists describe getting vetted into online groups based not only on friendships but also on hard skills they could offer to the group's cause, like software engineering or military training. Women were often vetted as recruiters because some believe they have greater people skills necessary to persuade new recruits. And then they talk about how she got into some neo-Nazi group, and like I said, I can't confirm any of this, but I want you to see that. I'm still waiting to
hear with what actually happened. I'm not hearing anything other than she had some no thoughts.
Yeah. We also don't know if she's real. And but we're told.
Oh, we both know the answer to that.
Yeah, I know. But you see, and they're calling it the alt tech ecosystem. So you see what's going on here. And I just thought, if you guys don't know, now you know. And if you want to read more of the article yourself, there's a link on our Patreon page to the jigsaw.google.com websites. You can look at it yourself. So.
That fucking name, dude. I can't get over it. The Jigsaw AI.
I know.
Like the fucking Saw movies. It's like you're gonna wake up in a room and it's like, on one hand you have a button that says the vaccines are safe and effective, and on the other side you have that they may be causing adverse health effects.
They
you
thought
have 30 seconds. Choose
they thought
wisely.
That was going to play well with people. They thought that was going to sound good.
Yeah.
Also, what's the thing they're pre-bunking right now, you said? That they're testing in, like, Eastern European countries?
I guess what they're calling anti-Ukrainian immigrant...
and refugee?
Like anti...
Isn't it crazy? Just totally unconnected aside. Boy, isn't it crazy how, like, in the last 50 years, refugees, immigrants, they don't cause a net negative to any country they're ever part of. That's just, how lucky have we gotten as a world to have achieved this, Brian? God bless Globo Homo.
Yeah.
In regard to this system, this Google thing, something that I want to point out, because what they're going to do is make it seem irrational to accept the ideas that groups that are more libertarian and more less totalitarian offer. They're going to misuse critical thinking skills. So you hear about an ad hominem attack, and how it doesn't debunk somebody's argument. An ad hominem argument is, well, you think this because you're an ugly woman, so you think that all women who are pretty must be bad people, right? That's an ad hominem attack. It doesn't have anything to do. One doesn't have anything to do with the other. They're going to use ad hominem attacks against people who point out, for instance, that people who call themselves MAPs might be dangerous to children because they're already admitting to a tendency, an interest that if they act on it would be harmful to children. And they'll say, well, that's an ad hominem attack. It's not an ad hominem attack. It is logic. It is you recognizing that an individual who claims to have an interest or a tendency toward doing a thing might do that thing if they lack discipline, if they change their mind about what's moral, and so on. Right? So you got to watch for that, because this is something that I've seen on social media a lot, where people with irrational ideas or who support unethical things will abuse these terms, and if you don't catch the difference between the way they're abusing it and the way it really works, you can get sucked in. And I've seen people get sucked in and persuaded that maybe there's such a thing as a harmless minor attracted person that they could just let sit off to the side and do their thing on their own, where they're not hurting anybody, like with cartoons and shit. And the reality is, no, that person needs medical attention, and they're not getting it because they're wallowing in their disorder, and they're using excuses to continue to wallow in that disorder instead of trying to receive treatment. And that actually is bad for both them and the community around them, that they may in the future endanger, because they may wallow further and further into that disorder and eventually do something bad. So you got to watch out for that. And they'll do that with every fallacy. You will see a lot of Mott-Bailey fallacies where they'll, and I'm going to compare this one to MAPS too, because they're minor attracted people that claim children can consent will substitute terminology like affection and love and care and well, not necessarily empathy, but they'll substitute those types of terms where they're talking about things that people do for children that are normal to do for children, giving a child a hug, giving a child a pat on the head, things like that. And they'll substitute that terminology for sex, and in order to make you think or persuade you to not think about the fact that children cannot consent to sex, and that there is a difference between a hug and sex, and there's a difference between just the term affection and sex, and there are solid reasons to acknowledge that difference and protect children from the latter versus exposing them to the former. And they'll even make I've had some pretty in-depth arguments with these people, and they will make every effort to obfuscate, and you'll be subjected to Kafka traps, you'll be subjected to bullying, you'll be mobbed, so you got to watch out for this. And Lat QCD92 points out there is something called the fallacy, where you use a fallacy incorrectly to say that a person must be wrong because their argument is fallacious. If somebody's argument is fallacious, they haven't proved their case conclusively. It doesn't necessarily counter your argument, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. The other aspect of the fallacy is when someone uses a fallacy as an argument or uses citation of a fallacy as an argument when the fallacy hasn't been committed. So, for instance, if somebody's arguing that they're just a minor attracted person and they won't hurt anybody, and you say you're already a convicted child molester, and it's true, and I'm not going to trust your word now because you've already done it before. That's not an ad hominem. That is a legitimate statement as to why you do not trust the person's argument, right? And so there's a difference there. So you have to watch out for that stuff. And this isn't going away. Google's going to do this. Facebook's going to do this. Twitter's going to do this.
Yeah.
Every social media site that is not independent of the conglomerate that Google and the big establishment social media have created among themselves. I would say a cartel. The social media cartel, the ones that all get together and ban people like Alex Jones at the same time.
Yep.
They're all going to do this. So be ready for it. Be aware of it. Also note, the reason that Twitter did not want to tell Elon Musk how many bots they have is because they've been using bots to do this for 10 years. Right? So be aware, because this isn't just one thing. This is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a very telling quote here from Dr. Rosenbeek. Great name, by the way. Our interventions make no claims about what is true or a fact. ... End quote. Yeah, but you keep repeatedly referring to what you call misinformation, which is necessarily antithetical to what is true or a fact, but it's what we referred to earlier in the show as a weasel word. The most ubiquitous weasel word we hear at the moment. Ask yourself why there's any need to differentiate misinformation from falsehoods. Notice when things are not being referred to as falsehoods or lies, consider that there is such a thing as misinformation that is true. Try to get your head around it, as counterintuitive as it sounds. There is no such thing as true falsehoods. That's actually a contradiction in terms. But true misinformation is not a contradiction in terms. It refers to information that they just don't want you to hear. Like the COVID vaccines don't work. Like the US is in a state of recession. Like men are men and women are women. Like Hunter Biden's laundering money through dodgy cunts in Ukraine. Don't get me wrong, sooner or later they will transition into full-on Ministry of Truth, where they will straight up just refer to these truths as falsehoods. They'll do it when they can legally get away with it. But we're sort of in this cusp between the old world of relative sanity and the Big Brother future. We're in this period where they still need to indulge in some degree of plausible deniability. That's why they use this term mis and disinformation. So when it turns out they were talking about truths that they find inconvenient, they can turn around and go, well, we didn't say it wasn't true on the whole.
Right.
It just wasn't true at the time to the best of our knowledge, according to, quote unquote, the science. And we call that misinformation. It's supremely ironic that what they're engaging in when they do this is the very thing that they would call misinformation if anyone else did it. Disinformation. Actually, I'm not entirely sure what the difference is. It's kind of fluid, but I think misinformation means inaccurate information, and disinformation is the deliberate suppression of true information, which is exactly what they're doing. But I'm not even going to give them that concession. I'm going to call it what it is: lies. When they deliberately frame the truth as misinformation, they are lying. They know they're lying. You know they're lying. They know you know they're lying, etc. The window between now and the Big Brother future is rapidly closing. And the time to call this shit out is, frankly, yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But Lord knows nobody's going to hold these big tech bastards accountable. The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is parallel economies, parallel social media networks, parallel everything. In other words, you should be listening to this show on Rumble instead of YouTube. And then when Rumble falls to these lying smear merchants as well, you move on to the next thing, the variety of next things, which in theory and hopefully will always exist. If not, then we really are doomed. The only true white pill is constant vigilance. Ladies and germs, be prepared to keep moving forever if necessary. I will see you wherever the hell we're going.
The other thing that's going to have to happen is, and it's going to be a lot harder than moving from social media to social media, is that at some point we're going to have to, at least in the United States, abandon the two-party system we have. And outsiders are going to be the only people that will help. People who have not been, involved in politics specifically. People that the FBI is going to react to like an immune system reacting to a bacterial invader, right? Those are the people that will come in and break down, like we've got too many departments, too many agencies, too many government workers, too many people who sit behind a desk and make decisions about your life without ever having been voted into office. They get appointed by your federal government or your state government. And if you want to understand how big that is, there's actually a Wikipedia article on this where you can look up how many departments the United States federal government has, and those departments then have agencies under them. And instead of just having a list of departments, it has a list of alphabet letters, and each of those letters of the alphabet has a list of departments underneath it. And then those departments have lists of agencies. There are, I think, more people at this point who work in government cubicle hell than who work in similar jobs in the private sector. And you spend more. If you pay taxes, you spend more on taxes, more likely than not, than you do on food, clothing, and shelter every year. Our average is that the average taxpayer, so mostly men, because, again, men pay about 200% of what women pay in taxes and get almost none of the benefits. So they pay most of the taxes when you subtract out the benefits, right? You pay more on average in taxes, a quarter of your income or more, than you do toward your food, your shelter, your clothing, your living expenses, right? Not counting entertainment, but your living expenses. And that's only going to grow as long as this stuff grows. And the only reason these agencies are able to, or these social media conglomerates, this cartel is able to do this shit, is because they have support from this oversized blob that we call a federal government that has departments and agencies that could be cut out without doing any harm at all to the American people. Right? And that is what needs to happen. And that's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next week. It's not going to happen next year. It's going to take a long, slow, painful, disgusting, dirty, nasty slog through the swamp that everybody keeps referring to. The swamp is deep enough that you could compare it to Never-Ending Story in the Swamps of Sadness, except that you're going to have to walk under the water. And the voters are going to have to be very careful because we're going to have to look at candidates individually. We're going to have to ignore what letters they have behind their names. We're going to have to ignore what their ad propaganda is and look at how they behave, how they answer questions, how they respond to criticism, and how they engage with people. And if they get into lower offices, how they administer their office.
Yep.
You know, we aren't going to be able to vote for somebody because they're a Democrat or because they're a Republican or because they're a Libertarian or because they're in any other party. We're going to have to look at people and say, did you support a law that ended up ultimately taking away some of the freedoms of the people that were under the control of your office?
Mm-hmm.
When somebody asked you question X about topic Y, did you give a direct answer in response to question X about topic Y, or did you give a topic Y adjacent talking point as your answer? And things like that.
Yeah.
And that's the only remedy for this. There's no quick answer. But in the meantime, you have to be aware of it, and you do have to keep ahead of it while all that's going on.
Yep. Basically, we've been not involved for far too long, and we have to start getting involved. As far as this like big tech problem, if you guys have any suggestions on anything that you think might, help protect people who are using the internet, who are using social media, like, do you have a favorite alternative media platform? If you do, can you tell us a little bit about it? Maybe we'll, make a bigger switch or become more active if we believe that there are people that are on there. Are there any big tech platforms that you think are, maybe you think that there's some that are worse than others, so maybe Twitch isn't as bad, I don't know. But definitely tell us about that. Maybe some browsers, any tools that you know of, and share it with the people in the comment section, because there probably are people that are looking at, alternative ways to essentially reach out, communicate, and share ideas with people online. And it seems like, as is predicted, the big tech sites are going to do more and more and more to try to control that. So anyway, I guess that's all we have for today. So we are going to head into the after show and look at this article from Nylon, which I guess is like a girly website. And the title is Hyperfemininity Isn't a Trend, It's a Movement. Hyperfemininity by Girly Girls for Girly Girls. And so it's girly girl feminism, I guess, which I guess is not regular feminism somehow. And we'll read all about it in the patron show. So if you guys want to join us, you have to go to feedthebadger.com. $5 a month will get you into the Discord, where you'll be able to watch the show like you are doing now. And if you give it higher levels, you can even be in the chat with us as we all cringe together in harmonious cringe, which is basically like regular cringe, but it's like in sync, like the band. And so please consider doing that by going to feedthebadger.com and starting up a monthly subscription. All right. So I hope to see you guys there. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications so you know when our streams go live. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. And most importantly, please share this video because sharing is caring. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News. And we will talk to you all in the next video. Take care, everybody.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.